Hang on. Hey, what's up, everybody? It is your boy MJ, and welcome to Before the Pour, 20 Questions with MJ. My guest today is Sommelier, which always sounds like I'm pronouncing a country in Africa, restaurateur, and best-selling author Victoria James. Victoria is the director of beverages and a partner at the recently Michelin-starred, again, COTE in NYC, and they just opened up a spot in Miami. Like I said, it's second year in a row. It received a James Beard nomination for Outstanding Wine Program. She has worked in restaurants since she was 13. She fell in love with wine, and when she was 21, she became certified as a sommelier. She has appeared on many notable lists: Forbes 30 Under 30, Food and Wine's 2018 Sommelier of the Year, Zagat's 30 Under 30, Wine Enthusiast 40 Under 40. We all get older. Wine and Spirits, Best New Sommeliers. She's the author of Drink Pink, a celebration of Rosé. It's published by HarperCollins, which she co-authored with her husband Lyle Railsback, also a guest of the show. And she is the author of the best-selling Wine Girl, The Obstacles, Humiliations, and Triumphs of America's Youngest Sommelier. Along with COTE's general manager, how do you say Amy's last name?
Zhou.
Amy Zhou, and HR director Cynthia Cheng. She founded Wine Empowered, a nonprofit that aims to diversify the hospitality industry by offering tuition-free wine classes to women and people of color. Welcome, Victoria. Is there anything you want to add?
I mean, that was quite the intro, so I have nothing else to add.
Yeah, isn't that great? Like sometimes, well, I'm never in this position because I'm hosting, but like, you ever somebody like, you're like, I did all that?
I want to give you an intro now, you
know. I'm going to warm us up, right? What I'm going to do is ask you some personal questions, and then I follow those by James Lipton's famous questions from inside the actor's studio. All right, so this is just for fun, for shits and giggles. So answer them quickly. Top of your dome. What is your favorite book?
Besides my own,
I
would say Italo Calvino's "Baron in the Trees."
Okay. What is your favorite movie?
King of Hearts.
Who's in that?
What was the question?
Favorite movie?
I don't know. It's an old French movie from the 40s. It's supposed to be this dramedy. I don't know the actors.
It sounded like I should know it, but now I know why I don't know it.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite musical artist?
I don't know if I have a favorite. That's actually a hard question. It's like a favorite wine, you know? I'm not sure if I can choose.
Okay, fair enough. What is your favorite food? You know, death row, last meal.
I love eggs. I think eggs are the perfect food.
Oh my God. Eggs are really good. They really are. Some soft cooked eggs.
So good.
Oh, so good. Who's your favorite athlete?
I don't know anything about sports, so this is probably not the right person, but I will say we have a lot of really great basketball players that come and support COTE every week, so I'll shout out to all of the amazing NBA wine drinkers.
Okay. That's why I can't get a reservation. Who was your favorite cartoon character? What was your favorite cartoon as a child?
I loved Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, the whole gang, Porky Pig.
Looney Tunes, the whole Looney Tunes. Yeah, Team Looney Tunes. What was your favorite cereal to eat whilst watching those cartoons?
I actually really loved cereal growing up quite a bit, addictively so. I would mix like 7 different boxes together. So it was more of like a sludge of 7 different types. The base probably always being like Captain Crunch or Fruity Pebbles.
Oh my God. It makes sense you went into wine. You just wanted a mixologist, you were doing your thing. What is your current exercise routine?
Working the floor at COTE Korean Steakhouse 5-6 nights a week.
Yeah, I would do it. Who is your favorite comedian?
I don't also have an answer for this right off the tip of my tongue. But yeah, I don't know. No answer. Lots of great comedians out there.
She's an equal opportunity laugher, everybody.
Yeah.
Who would you most like to have a bottle of wine with besides your husband?
Who would I most like to have? I would love to have a bottle of wine with the Obamas. They love eating and drinking, and they haven't come yet to our restaurant. And I think that's the one couple I would probably fangirl.
Nice. Very nice. Okay, now, Victoria, we're going to change the tenor of the questions. What is your favorite word?
I don't know. Joy. I would say something's positive.
Joy. Love it. What is your least favorite word?
Anything negative. I hate that. Hate, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. What turns you on?
I would say I love when people are very confident and sure of themselves.
Awesome. What turns you off?
I think the biggest thing is just like a sort of like darkness or negativity. I really don't love.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you love?
This is not actually great for a sommelier, but I love the sound of breaking glass.
Yeah, that was like the opposite. Like when Jordan was on, she's like, well, this is the next question. We'll go forward. What sound or noise do you hate?
So I should hate the sound of breaking glass because it means, costs for the restaurant. I hate the sound of course, it's like this nails on the chalkboard sound. That's the worst.
Jordan's was the sound of Zalto glass hitting the floor. What is your favorite curse word?
I really am not a huge fan of cussing.
Oh, okay. So, dang. I'm giving you dang. Dang it.
I mean, if someone else does it, it always sounds cool, and then I try to curse, and it just sounds really antiquated. So I stopped trying.
That's so funny. Good for you. I fucking love cursing.
See, it sounds good when you say
it. What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
It'd be great if I could get into writing.
I think you're doing okay there. You got a leg up.
Yeah, we'll see.
What profession would you not like to do?
I will say after, working in restaurants for so long, I would say that, the hardest jobs in restaurants, I think people often take for granted, and everyone who's a dishwasher, a porter, a busser, these are really, really hard jobs, and I respect them immensely. So lots of props there. It's a really hard job.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, you talk about how you bonded with the cleaning the grease trap and chasing cockroaches and pulling rats out of drains. That's commendable. Because everybody else just left.
Yes, yeah. No, it's definitely not sexy. It's a hard job.
And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That all of your friends and family are here.
Aww. That was fun, but the last answer was so cute. Oh my God. And listen, guys, if you want more Victoria, and I know you do, make sure you tune in to our episode of the Black Wine Guy Experience. Peace.
Those are hard questions. I feel like I was in a therapy session.
All right. Hey, everybody, what's up? It's your boy, MJ. Welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience. My guest today is sommelier, restaurateur, and best-selling author Victoria James. Victoria is the director of beverages and a partner at Michelin-starred COTE in New York City and most recently Miami. COTE, for the second year in a row, received a James Beard nomination for Outstanding Wine Program. She has worked in restaurants since she was the age of 13 and fell in love with wine and when she was 21, became certified as a sommelier. Victoria's name has appeared on many notable lists: the Forbes 30 Under 30, Food and Wine's 2018 Som of the Year, Zagat's 30 Under 30, and the Wine Enthusiast 40 Under 40. Wine and Spirits Best New Sommelier. She is the author of Drink Pink, a celebration of Rosé, which is published by HarperCollins and co-authored by her husband, Lyle Railsback, who has also appeared on the show. And she is the author of the best-selling book, Wine Girl, The Obstacles, Humiliations, and Triumphs of America's Youngest Sommelier, also published by HarperCollins. Along with COTE's General Manager, Amy Zhou, and HR Director, Cynthia Cheng, she co-founded Wine Empowered, a nonprofit that aims to diversify the hospitality industry by offering tuition-free wine classes to women and people of color. Welcome, Victoria. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think you got it. That's my life story. I think I can leave now.
Okay. Well, thanks. This is the fastest episode of the Black Wine Guy Experience, which is so bad because she's so delightful. So Victoria and I connected through Instagram. She was following me, which I was honored that she was following me even before Lyle, her husband, came on the show, and then I was like, yo, can we get Victoria on the show? And you guys were super busy. You were doing COTE. You're down in Miami, and you're a dynamic couple. So I'm so glad you're here and you made it. What's the wine we're drinking tonight? What you got me drinking on?
Yeah, so this is a Gruner Veltliner, not from Austria. It's actually from California, from Santa Rita Hills. The producer is Camins to Dreams, which means the path to our dreams in Catalan. It's an amazing wife and wife couple of Marea and Tara Gomez. So I thought I would bring it because there are so few women winemakers, women winery owners, and first and foremost, it's a delicious wine.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the stories, right? So that's like female couple making wine together out in one of my favorite places in the world, Santa Barbara County. It's very nice nose, and I'm gonna start sipping in a little bit, but. So let's hop into your book, Wine Girl, because fans you're writing. I look on your Instagram feed, just what people post, about the book. A lot of people. I don't know how many people who are listening know your backstory, but for those who haven't read it, you did say your childhood was not easy. There was alcoholism in the family, some mental illness, just like everybody else's family. And then you started working, you had to get a job. So if you want to, just share a little bit about what it was like growing up. And you were raised by your father, right? Single father.
More or less, yeah. I was separated from my mom when I was 7, and from there I was raised by my dad and my stepmother. We have a big family as well, lots of siblings. So I started working when I was 13 in this Greasy Spoon Diner in New Jersey.
Jersey, the home of the Greasy Spoon Diner.
I know, it really is.
I think the first episode of Diners, he came to Jersey. We are the diner capital of America.
Yeah, and some fabulous diners there. So I was kind of always enamored with restaurants. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. My mom came from this fancy aristocratic background, but my dad's background, his mom was a cotton picker, and so they really came from nothing. And we never went to restaurants growing up at all. So for me, even the concept of a Greasy Spoon Diner seemed extremely glamorous. So being able to work there when I was 13 actually didn't sound so terrible. It sounded very exciting.
Yeah, I have some friends. I was fortunate. That my dad worked for the post office, so that was a good job in the 70s, and so we would go out every now and then, but I used to work with kids, in the inner city, and a lot of them, they've just never been out to a restaurant, and that was one of the things we do, teach them how to eat out in a restaurant, order, tip. So
you can teach some adults how to do that still today.
I know you're not lying. So, what was that like? So, was it like just you walked in and you're like, oh my God, what was it that kind of connected you to the restaurant industry, hospitality at that age?
Well, for me, it was this whole realm I had no experience with. And this diner in particular was sort of under the railroad tracks, but it was the cool spot where everyone would hang out. And I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up. It kind of circulated around, who had the coolest new jeans. And of course, I never did. And I was also a bookworm. So, I just kind of wanted to be a part of this space where it was so social and it was this sort of, restorative, really hospitable place. And so I walked into the diner and I wanted to be a part of the energy, but was too timid and of course too poor to actually afford a sandwich there. So I was like, well, I think I want to work here instead.
Oh, wow. So tell me about like your first job. Like, I love hearing people's first job now. So I read the book, so I know, but people don't know. Tell me about that first job.
Yeah, so I think this is why Lyle and I connected so well as well. My husband, because his first job was at McDonald's, or I think it was a beekeeper or something like that. And, mine was at this Greasy Spoon Diner, which was not very glamorous. There was rotting food. Everything was from Cisco. People were extremely overworked and underpaid. It was very grimy. But, I loved it. And it was sort of this introduction to this very adult world, which at 13 was very exciting.
Yeah, it's like, would you say like restaurants, there is a sense of family when you work at a restaurant?
I think so. And not having that really at home or having a really dysfunctional family at home, you always kind of gravitate towards these missing parts of you. And in restaurants, I found friends and the sense of family and people that were like me that wanted to work hard and wanted to be in this special place.
Yeah, so like, I like what you said there. So 13, like what drove you to work so hard? Like most 13-year-olds, like you said, they're like, they want some designer jeans, they want to go to the mall with their girlfriends. Like your work ethic is off the chain. Like what kind of drove that?
Well, at first, I'll be completely honest. It was just mercenary. I wanted money. And, it wasn't even about having cool jeans. I remember when I was in the 6th grade, every other kid got to go on a field trip and I couldn't because we couldn't afford like the $10 to send me on the field trip. And, of course, the teacher was pissed because they had to come in that day and didn't have a day off and they were just sitting with me in the classroom. And, I just wanted access to things that everyone else seemed to have access to. And so I thought, what better way to do that than to get a job?
Yeah. Wow. That's wow. But that's powerful stuff. There's so much. The book is really rich. It's called Wine Girl, but it's definitely about life. So where'd you go from after that first Greasy Spoon? What was your next restaurant job?
So we moved to another town in New Jersey called Metuchen, which is near Edison, near Rutgers University. And of course, I gravitated towards another diner. This one was not under the railroad tracks in New Jersey, but it was on the highway. So it was where, truckers would stop off. It was open 24 hours, which in itself is exhilarating as a concept. And so I would work the graveyard shift. I would work 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., sometimes 4 a.m., and then, spend a few hours sleeping and then go to school.
Oh, my wife's a social worker. That's a CPS move.
Yes.
How are you working?
No, looking back at it, and like talking to our HR director now, COTE, I'm like, how did they allow me to do this? Like, it's just crazy. But this was also, restaurants in the 90s and early aughts were just, very Bourdainish. It was no man's land. You could do whatever you wanted.
That's crazy. That's like, I'm just like, who does that? Who works? What teenager works at and then goes to school? Like, you still went to school too. Like, I know kids who would work, but then they wouldn't come to school. Like, that's wow. So lost my thought because I was just picturing you. So you're working at the 24-hour diner, right? Greasy Spoon. What same thing, just waiting tables, or did you have any like managerial responsibilities? Like what like did you start?
Definitely not. I mean, I was a complete mess at the time, probably because I was operating on like 3 hours of sleep a night and permanently smelled like French fries. I was just waiting tables and making friends, and I learned a lot of invaluable lessons from some of the older servers there. And I think that's really when I got a sense of how big the world is and what customer service really means. I talk in the book about the love cycle, which is something I learned from, this guy named Frankie who worked there, who was this maybe 60, 70-year-old guy who had been in the industry forever. He had this like push broom mustache, like almost no teeth left, and this really like raspy voice. And he showed me how to love guests, even the ones that, are the most difficult to love, and why that's so important.
Oh, wow. Wait, Greasy Spoon Diner, he taught you, he loved on his customers?
I think I mentioned this in the book, and I don't know if it's exactly the verbiage I use, but I think sometimes, the more honest the job, the more honest the people. Wow. And service really keeps one humble if you allow yourself to remain in that state of humility throughout service. And that's why I still work the floor at COTE, every, 5 days a week, if not 6, because there's a purity to service, I think. And, even in a greasy spoon, you can learn these life lessons. Lessons are everywhere.
I love that. So when was like when did you graduate from the diner circuit into, something more akin to like the world you've been living in and that you are now an owner in?
I think that was when I went to college. So growing up in New Jersey, of course, I always pined for the big city across the river, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be in New York City. So I got a scholarship to Fordham University and started studying psychology. Of course, needed to still pay for like the other $50,000 that wasn't covered by the scholarship. And so I started bartending at a small spot on Restaurant Row, which is still there, called Latanzi. Mm-hmm. And Restaurant Row is 46th Street in the theater district. So but at the time especially, it seemed very, very fancy to me. And I knew nothing about bartending, definitely nothing about wine or spirits, which became quickly apparent. And I realized I needed to learn. So I found this dusty copy of Wine for Dummies behind the bar.
That's a favorite book of mine.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a classic for a reason. And I thought, well, this is perfect. I'm a dummy and I need to know about wine. And, I was pretty surprised actually, because I love just absorbing information in books. But reading about wine is quite dry. But, I finished the book in like a couple days, and I got then the Wine Bible. And then I started reading more region-specific books. And after about a semester, I realized I wasn't studying psychology. I was just reading wine books. So I deferred for a semester / permanently dropped out of college to become a sommelier. And, I go into more detail in the book about what that process was like and how one becomes one at 21 and then goes on to work at a Michelin star restaurant and then 2 Michelin star and then, become a wine director and such. But that was the slippery slope, MJ.
Oh, my God. Dropped out of Fordham to become the youngest som. You were the youngest som at the time, right? Are you still as whenever?
I'm old now. I'm like 30.
Yeah, I know you're so old. So what was that like? Like, what was that process like? You went from wine to dummies to the youngest certified som. Like, I know these are wine as a wine pub. People want wine stories. They want wine stories.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly quite challenging. Obviously, especially then there were not young females in the business, and I was not very welcome. But it's also studying for these it's quite insular. You're by yourself reading most of the time. I joined a school and a tasting group to learn more about wine, and that was enlightening, if not traumatic at times. And there are a lot of bad people in the wine world, and so it was certainly not without its challenges. And then I remember when I became a sommelier when I was 21, I had just taken the certified exam. It was also at the same time as Sommelier and Aureole, which was at the time a Michelin-starred restaurant here right in Bryant Park. And I remember I took the exam, I passed it, I was so excited and elated. And then, when something really exciting happens to you, the first thing is, who am I going to tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had no one to tell because I had no friends. I was just working 80 plus hours a week. I was studying. I was part of this old boys club and, or I wasn't a part of it. I wanted to be, and they didn't quite want me. So I remember walking around the city and trying to call my little sister and tell her. But, it was a really lonely, lonely time, I think.
Wow. That's powerful. So I read a review for Wine Girl. Actually, my producer did. I actually read Wine Girl.
No, I didn't read the reviews.
No, but it talks about you had some gentlemen come in and order a bottle of white Burgundy for lunch, and for people out there like who don't understand, who don't believe, like. Tell that story about, because I think I DM'd you. I was like, oh my God, I just read that passage. I was like, did he really say that?
Yeah. So this is the opening chapter of the book. So you don't even have to read the whole book to get into the whole story. If
it's called a teaser. They're like, oh, they're gonna want to dive in even more.
Yeah. So I was 21 at Aureole, as mentioned, and I was working a Monday lunch shift, which is like the shift they give to the newbie, right? Surprisingly, though, on this newbie shift, someone ordered a really expensive bottle of white Burgundy. And instantly I was like, oh my goodness, my wine director is going to love me. I sold this bottle, which is like a $600 bottle of Chardonnay. It's so fancy. And so I excitedly present it to this guest, and it's, a group of course, slick-haired men in the corner giving me their beady eyes. They approve the bottle. I go to open it, and it's amazing. It's incredible. It was one of the first times I'd ever had Grand Cru white Burgundy, but of course, as a sommelier, I knew if a wine was corked or not, right? Mm-hmm. Present the bottle. They taste it. They say it's corked, and it's terrible. And to take it back and what do I know about wine, because I'm this girl and I'm so young and I have perfume in my nose, and I just walk away from the table completely shaken. So I go to the manager and one of the captains, and I'm sort of like, what do I do? And they're like, serve it. He's just being an asshole. Come on, like just strong arm him, sort of thing. It's fine. We love it. Our manager also had a huge penchant for white Burgundy, and he had probably drank bottles and cases of Domaine Ramenais, which was the producer. So not very helpful. I'm like, how am I going to strong arm this guy? The guys. So I think of another idea. And so I go up to the wine cellar. There's one bottle left of this Grand Cru Chevalier Montrachet from Domaine Ramenais. I grab it. I present it to the guest. And then instead of opening the second bottle, I actually give him the first bottle. And he loves it. And he says, it's great. And thank you for opening this new bottle because, the first one was so terrible and I don't know what I'm talking about. And he just reams me out in front of his guests. Of course, he doesn't know that I did the bait and switch, which I haven't done since, but worth at the time. And then he goes on to not only offend me and every woman on the planet Earth, but he essentially, they're just terrible humans. Then he says something terrible, which actually, if you read the book, it's different than what I say on my audiobook.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel comfortable saying it.
That's right. I know that. I know why now.
But he says, and I'll say what I say in my audiobook, he said, well, at least she's white.
Yeah.
And, he uses a racial slur that's different that I write in the book. And I think that when my editor first read this, they were like, there's no way that's true.
Right.
This was before Black Lives Matter. This was before people were even having conversations about race, even really about misogyny in the wine world. So it's hard to believe, but it happens every day in restaurants.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well. I kind of know that.
I'm sure.
But what I think is so crazy, like, what's great for people who don't understand high-end service is that you present the bottle and you go in the back and you open it and you bring it back to the table. So that's how you're able to pull that maneuver off, you know? Because what would the restaurant have done if you had to open another bottle?
So this, they probably would have lost their shit. It's a very expensive bottle.
Yeah.
You can't
buy the glass that.
You can't buy the glass it, and also, you can't return it to the vendor because there's no trace of TCA, right? You can't prove that it's corked, so the vendor will say, "I'm not giving you credit for this." And, cost at the restaurant was highly monitored. We would shake martinis until they were wholly watered down. I mean, it was just absurd. So I, of course, was so nervous. I wasn't getting support from the management, and I thought this was the only way to move forward.
Well, the wine was impeccable. He said so himself. So, like...
Yeah, and I think that this is something that, oftentimes... women or people who are underestimated feel that they have to come up with these solutions on the spot, and oftentimes, they're made to feel like they're the smallest person in the room, but they have to make the decision for the bigger picture.
Yeah. Wow. So I also read a review that described your story in Wine Girl as a love story, and how dedication to one's craft can serve as a lifeline. How do you feel when you read something like that? Do you feel a lot of truth in that?
I mean, so it's funny, when I came out with the book, there were two different types of reviews or feedback. I think people loved either, one, they loved the fact that it was this love story to hospitality, or two, maybe if you were in the literary world, you were hoping that it would like have some Dickensian ending where I would like die of syphilis alone, sort of thing. That's the literary world. So, I think some people thought like, oh, it's so saccharine at the end. She gets married in this, castle, and hospitality saves her in the world. And it's a little much, and maybe, but I think that it was really important for me when writing this book that it wasn't really about my story, even though I suppose obviously it is. It's really about the world of hospitality and anyone who feels marginalized in it, and to give them hope and purpose, and to show, the real restorative power that hospitality can have. Yeah.
Wow. I also read somewhere, it was someone likened it to a kitchen confidential of wine. I mean, that's good company, right? I mean, Tony, like, how does that, because it's, when you like, you're like on the world stage now, like, how do you, I love your humility, but like when people write something like that, how does it make you feel?
Can I tell you a funny story?
Yes, please.
Okay.
We love funny stories.
I love it. So, I suppose maybe the reason they said that, or one of the reasons, is the editor of the book, who's Daniel Halpern. And Daniel Halpern is Anthony Bourdain's editor, and he's sort of a legend within the wine and food world. And so when I was writing this book, over the course of 5 years, I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I landed at Ecco with Anthony Bourdain's editor? Big dreams, right? So it just so happens when we first opened COTE, and I write about this in the book, Adam Platt comes in, who's the restaurant reviewer for New York Magazine, and an incredible gentleman. And he comes in with Daniel Halpern, who is Anthony Bourdain's editor. And of course, I'm super nervous because not only are we going to get reviewed by New York Magazine, COTE has just opened, everything's writing on this, and he's coming in with like my dream editor. No pressure. So I go over to the table and offer them some wine. And I don't think Daniel will mind me saying this, but Daniel looks at the list and goes, "There's nothing I want to drink here."
Oh, man.
And it's like a gut punch. Like, oh my God, my hero just looked at the wine list and said, like, no thanks, pass. And he was looking at the buy the glass list. And, we bottle everything in magnums specifically for us. So when we first opened, especially, we had no money. And so we had like 6 wines by the glass. And I said, well, not to worry. We have tons of other wines by the bottle. I'm happy to open anything for you and that we can drink it together. And he said, fine, let's see. I opened this bottle of wine for him. It was actually from the North Fork of Long Island. It was Makari Vineyards, their Bordeaux blend. And he loved it. I was like, oh my goodness, thank God, saved. And we kind of kept in touch. I dropped my card over email. He asked me like where he could buy the wine. And whenever he needed a reservation, I kind of, helped him out there as best as I could. And years passed by. And so when I finished the book, I was like, oh man, I wonder if I should send it to Daniel. But, the literary world is very, you have to go through the proper channels, right? So I sent it to my agent. And I said, okay, here's the manuscript. It's done. Would you mind, in addition to sending it to other publishers, to send it to Daniel? And she was like, okay, well, slow down. Like,
Slow your roll.
like, I'll send it to him, but, don't get your hopes up. And this was like a Friday afternoon. I was like, okay, of course. Yeah, I mean, he published Anthony Bourdain and like Patti Smith, like, of course. And so I go through my weekend and she said, I don't know if you know this about the process, but when you submit your manuscript, it takes a few months before you hear back from publishers. Monday morning, I get a call, and my agent said that Daniel loves the book, and he wants to preempt it, which means it doesn't even go to auction, which is another big deal. It doesn't even see other publishers. He wants to take it off right away. And I'm just completely floored. I'm like, wow, my dream editor wants to buy this book. And he read it in one weekend. Holy shit. So, I mean, I think also that goes to talk about the power of hospitality and the fact that, years earlier, I had just served him a bottle of wine that he had liked and those relationships. And, it, I suppose in some ways helped me get on his radar, and he's just the most incredible editor to work with. And, for me, it was never about the money or the prestige. It was about being able to tell my story in the right way that would have the most impact. Mm-hmm. And I only trusted Daniel with that because he did such a great job with Anthony. And so we worked together on the book, and he made some changes. And when it came out, I think it was probably, the most proud I've ever felt. And I think I have Daniel definitely to thank for that. And he definitely crafted it in a very Bourdain-esque way, to answer your question, in a long way.
No, that's totally makes sense. Why Makari Bordeaux blend of all wines? I'm interested now.
Well, I think that, there are a lot of local wines here in New York, and I think that we should support especially the good ones as well. Great female winemaker, and the wine's delicious, and it's at a really affordable price point for guests. And I kind of wanted to be a little tongue-in-cheek because Daniel was being, he was, sort of challenging me in a way. Mm-hmm. And I actually had been challenged before in this way by Simon Kim, who is the proprietor of COTE Korean Steakhouse and an amazing gentleman. When he first hired me to be his wine director at Piora, his first restaurant, which was this little Michelin-starred jewel box in the West Village. I had just been hired. I had been there for a week. And he gives me a test. He says that he has a friend in town. He's only going to be in town for one day. And he had heard that last weekend I had visited Makari on the North Fork of Long Island. And he wants me to get a bottle for them. Oh, and by the way, he's leaving for his flight in 2 hours. So, of course, I am like, oh my gosh, this is like my test as a new wine director. I have to find this bottle of Makari. And so I called, my rep, vendors, different wine shops, the Makaris, and I made it happen. So it was on his flight back to Korea. But for me, it's always kind of my go-to wine if you want to show someone something that's unexpected from a local vintner.
So I'm a little bit older than you, and when I was living in New York before I moved to California, like the Long Island wines they weren't that good.
Yeah.
I mean, so like you said, it was unexpected. What's their style? Like, is it right bank? Is it left bank? Like, what's kind of like their style? What's the signature style of this wine? Because most people, I don't know, like I'm gonna go something. I'm just so intrigued by that pull. So now I'm gonna have to find the wine. But tell me about it so I can go find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think you're right, MJ. I think a lot of the wines are still not great on Long Island. Unfortunately, they've succumbed to the easy golden handcuffs of tourism.
I know that's people. I tell people, I'm like, I know, like people like, oh, I got friends who are like, oh, we have wine in Missouri. I'm like, you have wineries in Missouri, bro. I said, I know it's romantic. You got vines, but like that I agree. That's what it was like. But Makari, because this actually came up in another episode yesterday. I was sitting down with Marquita Levy, and she was
Marquita.
big. She's big up in Makari. So I was like, I need to ask some more questions. So yeah.
Yeah, Marcari's great, Pomegnac, Lens. I mean, there's a lot of great producers out there, and I think that if you can support local, it's really wonderful. And the good guys should certainly be rewarded, and they're standouts for sure. So I mean, the climate's not too dissimilar from Bordeaux in a lot of ways. There's that maritime influence, the soil types as well. Merlot does really well there. I mean, I know Merlot has had a hard time the last few years, but it can be quite exceptional. And I've had I think 1995 Pomegnac Merlot from the North Fork, and it's saying like Old Bordeaux. So,
wow.
There's definitely some cool stuff that can be done there, and I hope more people will start doing so.
Yeah. So as a California wine lover on, but like, are people picking riper out there now? Is something to do with climate change, or just the vines are more mature?
Climate change is changing everything. Every wine region, everywhere, and I think that in Domaine Tempier, they're planting a Sirtico, which is a Greek variety in the south of France and Provence. And I think winemakers in general, all over the world, are starting to plant different varieties, harvesting certain ways. It's not it's no joke for sure.
No, it's serious. So going back to before I took us on the detour down the North Fork, you were mentioning we told the story about the service and the issues of sexual harassment, misogyny, racism, discrimination in the industry. What gives you hope right now?
So, MJ, when the book came out, it came out during the pandemic, actually, the week that everything shut down here in New York. And I was sort of nervous about the reaction. How would people respond to me essentially calling out blatant misogyny, harassment, racism, rapists. Like crazy shit goes down in this book. And I wondered, would anyone believe me? Would it matter? Would it make a difference? But then something started to happen that gave me hope. And I think over the course of a few months, I started to receive messages from women and men all over the world that had read the story and saw themselves in the pages. And so much so that it culminated in myself and a group of other very brave women coming forward in the New York Times to talk about the harassment that happened specifically at the Court of Master Sommeliers. And that came out in October. So I think that there's a lot that's changing. And I think that people are starting to realize, that these terrible things have happened to women and people of color and that we need to change it. And so I think these conversations, the fact that they're even happening now, whereas a year ago they weren't, gives me hope.
Very nice. I'm going to pause. We need to take a quick break, and we'll come back. And we're going to get into, we're going to delve deeper into your activism, I'm going to call it. All right, so we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So, yeah, the New York Times article was huge. Tell me how Wine Empowered came into existence, how it came into being.
Yeah, so Wine Empowered is a 501c3 nonprofit I co-founded along with Amy and Cynthia. We actually started this nonprofit in 2018, way before it was hip or cool to talk about, offering free wine education to women and persons of color. And like, who cares? Why is this important?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Instagram friend, but he said something, and I think it happened after. He's like, watch out for Black Lives marketing. Right.
Oh, no.
So I mean, the fact that you said this was, you guys got to pick up the book. You read the book. I mean, she's very passionate and very raw. But like the fact that you started before, says a lot about you and who you are. So.
Well, it's interesting. So we came together. We all work at the same restaurant, Amy, Cynthia, and I. And I had this idea actually while I was getting my hair cut, which I hate getting my hair cut because you can't do anything. You just sit there and for hours. And for me, who always likes to be on emails, that's torture. So anyway, I thought of this idea because we were offering already tuition-free wine classes at COTE to anyone who wanted to learn. And I thought that if someone got a little bit of wine education, maybe they would become a sommelier one day or they would sell more tableside. But something happened that I didn't expect. And what happened was it really empowered these individuals. It gave them this strength and this confidence. And I saw bussers become servers, become bartenders, become managers. And I realized that when you believe in someone and you give them this little bit of education, it can change their lives. And so I couldn't do it alone. And so I talked to Cynthia and Amy, and, they were down to help as well. We went through the crazy process of getting a 501c3, which I don't know if you're familiar with the nonprofit world, but it's insane. Essentially, the government doesn't want you to not pay taxes. So trying to be like, no, we're going to start this nonprofit where people are drinking wine. It's going to be great was a very hard
That's
sell.
a hard sell. That's a tough sell.
It was a hard sell. But we finally got it. We found lawyers that were willing to do it pro bono because we had done some wine tastings with them and they were really lovely. I had met them on the first book tour with Lyle, actually. So in 2018, we became incorporated as a 501c3, and we started the planning process for these classes in 2019. But in 2019, people still didn't think this was necessary. They were like, oh, no, we have plenty of women. Like, look, you're a woman in wine. Like, that's great. Like, I know I have one black friend. Like, it's great, And so I actually decided to write a piece that came out in Eater, New York, where I did the legwork and found the statistics. So I went to every Michelin-starred restaurant or called them or texted them and found out who their wine buyer was here in New York City. And at the time, pre-pandemic, there were over 80 Michelin-starred restaurants. Well, you can guess what the percentage of female wine buyers were, and of course, people of color. It's terrible. 0 were black. And I think it was 15% were women. And so I think that you can't really hide when you are presented with the facts. And a wine buyer position is even a step above being a sommelier. It's the people that really hold the power and influence the market.
You got the money.
You have the money.
The money, yeah.
You're voting with your dollars.
Yep.
And these are the people that decide what wines get on list. Do female winemakers get on the list? Do people of color get on the list? And also, who are hired for these wine programs? And it was a really hard article for a lot of people. There were a lot of fragile white male egos that were shattered. And a lot of these guys, I would get DMs and on Twitter and Instagram saying, no, but I'm not racist. We have someone who is Mexican here and they're the dishwasher. I'm like, dude, no.
Digging the hole deeper.
Seriously. And so I think people get really uncomfortable when you have these conversations. And I think that's actually okay. And after that, a few months later, we launched Wine Empowered, and people finally realized, oh, this is why we need this, because there are no people that look like me or you, MJ, in these positions of power.
I know, because I quit. No,
I bet. I mean, I'm sure you have so many stories.
Oh,
you should write a book.
Yeah, maybe. I should write a book, but I'm just sitting here amazed. She's like, I can't sit still. I got to be on emails. I got to write these books. Got to order these wines.
It's a curse, really.
Yeah, a good more power to you. Wow, I love it. The perseverance, though, and something you said earlier. Just this, there's a thread of hospitality in your life. You said, how you served your editor this bottle of wine, and you're like, that's a little piece of hospitality. How you took care of these attorneys who then came and did pro bono work, right? So show title is going in my head. Ideas are going. So let's switch gears a little bit, because I do love, you being so open, but I know we can lighten it up for you guys a little bit here. So you recently wrote a book about rosé called Drink Pink, with illustrations by your Renaissance man of a husband, Lyle Railsback. How did that book come about? You guys at home drinking some rosé and so let's write a book? I mean, how did that come about?
Oh, I'm surprised Lyle hasn't told you the story. It's a good one.
Okay.
So actually this happened, I was already writing Wine Girl, and I pitched this, idea. Actually, I'll start at the beginning, actually. So I was working at Pure as a wine director, Simon Kim's first restaurant, and I was doing a little bit of writing on the side. So I wanted to kind of get my name out there. I would write articles for free, anyone who wanted anything. And so I co-wrote this piece for New York Magazine about 21 rosés you have to drink for summer or something like that. Anyway, a literary agent came across the piece and was like, this is really great. I love your voice. No one has written a book yet on rosé, and you're a sommelier. Do you want to write a book on rosé? And I think anyone else would have been like, oh my gosh, this is like a book deal. This is great. But for me at the time, I was still early 20s. And as I talk about in the book, given the nickname The Wine Girl. So I thought the rosé girl would be a demotion maybe. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed. And yes, no one had written a book on rosé, but I didn't know if I should be the one to do so and who would care. So I went home, I talked to my then boyfriend, now husband, Lyle, and I said, yeah, this literary agent, pitched this idea to me. And I just don't really know if I want to do it, And I actually countered back to her. I said, hey, Allison, and she's amazing. I said, what, book on rosé, what about a book about the obstacles, humiliations, and triumphs of America's youngest sommelier? And it's filled with misogyny and everything. And she was like, no one. She's like, no one's going to read it. This is pre-Me Too, this is so she was like, yeah, I don't know. What about this rosé book? I was like, okay, that's kind of different. So I went home, I talked to Lyle. And he said, no, you should write a book on rosé. Yes, you are a woman in wine, but you're also a great sommelier, and you can write about rosé from a place of real care and, talk and highlight the growers that you love. So you should do it. So I went back convinced to my literary agent, and I said, okay, I'll write it. And she said, great. I want it to be really fun, though. I want it to have beautiful illustrations. Do you know anyone that you work with that is a good illustrator? And I was like, oh, my boyfriend, I guess, went to art school.
I mean, who the fuck is this guy, Lyle Railsback?
And she was like, oh, yeah, your boyfriend. I don't know. That sounds like a nightmare. No, I was like, no, it's going to be great. So I made him do a few spot illustrations just to show her. And she's like, these are actually quite charming. Yeah, he's on board. So I submitted a book proposal, and HarperCollins bought it right away. And so we had, I think, a really quick deadline because we sold it in the fall, and they want it to be out for, of course,
rosé season, baby. It's rosé season. Rosé all day.
Indeed, in 2017. So we had, I think, a month and a half to write it. And so for me, I compiled all of the research and had it done in 2 weeks. And Lyle's the opposite. I'm very type A, and this is why we work well together. He's like, we have a month and a half, so much time. So he had this time to do 100 illustrations, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
But he was like, no, it's going to be fine. And days passed by, weeks, and I was getting super anxious. I think he had done 10, maybe a dozen illustrations. And this is early in the relationship, so I don't know if you've ever worked on a high pressure project with a loved one.
Nah.
It's not for everyone.
No. They often say don't work with your spouse. It's a very common divorce accelerator. Accelerate.
Yeah, I mean, so I learned in retrospect I probably should have given him a fake deadline, but no, he actually crushes it. So he works, I learned, better under pressure, whereas I work better if I know I have like 3 weeks left. He finished them all in like the last week, and they were better than the ones he had done earlier in the month. We have this joke that there's this one illustration we both hate that made it in there. And it's like really big, and we're all like, whenever we see it, we just cringe. And it was one of the first ones he had done. So I learned a valuable lesson that, to trust him. And so the book came out, and we organized this great book tour, and it ended up turning into an engagement tour because he proposed to me on the tour. And it was really lovely to be able to do this project together and to speak some soul into the then vapid world of rosé.
Yeah, so let's talk about the vapid world of rosé, because I read a piece online you wrote, it appeared in Vice, about the dark history of rosé. What was that about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, people think rosé is all puppies and flowers, which it can be. But it's a wine like nothing else. And first and foremost, it's about stories, right? So there are some dark stories that can be told around this beverage. It was the first wine ever before white and red, actually. And I tell this a few different stories, for example, about Schilcher, which comes from the south of Austria, made from this grape called Rabiat Pearl, which is called the rabid pearl. And essentially, people were wondering why all of these animals would drink, or rather why they would eat these grapes, and they would just go absolutely rabid. And it was because, of course, they were fermenting.
They're fermenting, yeah.
And it was wine and such. And that was sort of the lightest tale I told, but it gets darker from there.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God. I'm going to have to, when this is over, she's very, very good. Yeah, I have to, here's more. But, yeah, and then also I like just the piece about, a lot of rosé was just mix a little red with some white wine,
Rosé.
Yeah, it's rosé. So you're going for the color. So you're on this book tour, and it turns into a proposal tour. How did he propose?
Yeah, so Lyle is such a Renaissance man, as you mentioned. He can do all things. So it was the first stop on the west coast leg of our book tour. We're in Orcas Island off the coast of Washington, and we were doing this event that was supposed to be an homage to Lulu Peyraud of Domaine Tempier in Bandol in Provence. So it was a bouillabaisse dinner, which is this incredible, of course, fish stew, as you know, and it's delicious with rosé. So it was at this cafe called Roses. And we were so many guests had already signed up. They got a copy of the book. We had some famous chefs there, and I was super nervous. I was getting ready for the event. And beforehand, Lyle was like, well, let's just, go out for a little walk to de-stress beforehand. And, of course, then he gets down on one knee on this beautiful setting in Orcas Island, and it's just us, which is really lovely. And he proposes, and, of course, I say yes. But the probably in retrospect, not the best idea to do before a book tour event, because you're so excited and you're at a loss for words. You're just so giddy. I was like I bombed that presentation, bombed that
Thanks,
event.
Lyle.
I think, oh my gosh, there was, I won't say who, but there's this amazing chef. She was asking me questions about the book, and she has this very famous restaurant in San Francisco. And I was just a complete, bimbo. She was like, so why did you write this book on rosé? I was like, I don't know. I love wine. It was just, I had nothing to say. So, bombed that event.
She was like, see that ring? That's fine. So what are some of your favorite rosés? What do you drink at home? Because I know you guys are big fans of, because his work with Kermit, just wines that really go with food. What rosés do you like to quaff?
Yeah. Well, Domaine Tempier, I think, is the OG, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're fortunate. There's so many great rosés now being made all over the world. And so, Bermejos makes a great one on the Canary Islands. it's just like smoky, and you know, it's just can go with everything, even meats. I love also like darker colored rosés, which I know is not very hip, but I love them, especially Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo's from like Defermo or Presidium. Of course, Valentini is like, you know, from the auction circuit world. It's also another OG.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that just like red and white, the world of rosé is so expansive, and, you know, I just love trying them all.
Yeah. Do you have, you named so many different ones, but do you have a preference? Like, are you like, do you like it to be like Rhone grapes, or are you just like, you know, just if the shit is good, fill up my glass and have this salad niçoise and, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you kind of captured it there with talking about the food. For me, it's always about what am I eating first. And oftentimes I'll like honor that what grows together goes together. And Lyle is like very intense about this. When I first started dating him, he'd be like, "Are you coming home from work? I'll make you dinner." And I thought, like, I don't know, like mac and cheese or like something heated up in the microwave. I would come home and it'd be like this 4-course dinner, you know, where it was, he's like, "We're going to have Ligurian cuisine tonight, and it's going to be torta di verdure with 3 different types of rosé di dolce agua. And these are Taggiasca olives from Punta Crena in Liguria." And just very like, very goes together, and honoring, you know, these centuries of tradition and these regional cuisines. So every time, and he's obviously the chef in the household, every time we make anything, you know, it's usually a historical traditional dish. And when I say we make it, he makes it, and I help chop the vegetables. And, you know, then we try to research, like, what are they drinking in this place at this time?
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. You know, in the book you talk about, you know, falling in love with him, and you know, when you just mentioned how he cooked these 4-course meals. What was it like because you had a lot of, you know, dealt with a lot of adversity with men. How was it, you know, what was it like to find someone that, you know, that you could trust, and I mean, it looks like he just loves you and just is just, you know, what's that like to have that safety net, like he also is probably like a ninja, like, you know what I mean, like to know you're like your back is gotten.
Yeah, he is definitely a ninja. No, I love him so much. But when I first met him, I, as you mentioned, had faced a lot of adversity with men and did not trust him or any man for that example. You know, I'm a multiple time rape survivor, and like men every day are creepy and annoying in the restaurant still, that I'm a co-owner in, you know, and so it's hard to let your guard down. And when I first met him, actually, he was selling wine for Kermit Lynch. And so I thought he was just trying to sell me wine. And I was like, he seems nice, but he's just trying to sell me on his wine. And then he invited me over for dinner at his house. And I was dating someone else at the time, and I was like, you know, no, I mean, I'm not that kind of girl. Like, I'm seeing someone. And he's like, no, this is strictly business. I meant like a dinner party. Other people will be there too. And then it turns out, of course, like a week before the dinner party, I had broken up with this other person, and so I wrote Lyle, I was like, "I'm sorry, this is going to mess up your dinner party arrangement. I'm actually going to come by myself." And he was like, "That's perfect. No one else has been invited. It's just going to be you and me for dinner for 2. And, you know, there's something about the way Lyle does something that if any other guy had said that, I would have been like, all right, well, creeper.
Yeah,
I'm not going to your apartment in like Bed-Stuy in the middle of nowhere. But he's just so genuine and so honest, and he's so good. There's not a bad bone in his body. I mean, he's just so genuine. So I let my guard down, and I'm very happy I did. It was, you know, he cooked an amazing 4-course dinner. And more than that, even, like, you know, I thought, okay, this guy is going to be like most men in wine, such a douche, and going to like try and impress me with fancy bottles. And he also works for Kermit Lynch, so he's probably going to pull out like Cocherie and Ravenot and Allemande and be like, let me tell you about the time that I've done all these fancy things. And, you know, it's just going to be so dull and boring. You know, but it's the opposite. So he actually pulled out wines that I had never heard of that were like $12 a bottle. And he talked about why he loved them and why they were great. And we stayed up all night reading poetry and, painting and just talking. And I think that when you meet the right person and you're able to let them in, it can be a really special thing.
Yeah. Well, I love the love story of you and Lyle in the book, and how what your spoiler, but what I won't say it, but what your sister said about him, like how your family embraced him. Like I was like, wow, this is like I'm getting goosebumps. I'm like, wow, this is a special book.
Yeah. No, I think Eric Asimov from the Times was texting me when he was finishing the book, and he was like, "Oh, thank God there was a happy ending." Like, oh my gosh, for a while I was just trudging through, being like, "Okay, it's getting worse and worse. Holy moly!" Like, thank God there's a love story at the end. And yeah, thank God I met Lyle. I don't know where I would be today without him.
Well, speaking of Eric, you were on a wine panel of rosé champagne with him. Was that fun? I mean, because he was on a pod. He's a fun guy, but that's work. Like, what's it like? Do you ever say to yourself, "You're just a girl from Jersey," and then like you're just like sitting with all these? Well, you're a best-selling author, but like all these award winners. I mean, what was it like to be on a panel with Eric?
It's awesome. Eric is amazing, and I still pinch myself when I have these incredible opportunities. When you go to those tastings, you go into the fancy New York Times building, and you go all the way up to this, nth floor overlooking the gorgeous city. And you're there with these pristine glasses all filled, pre-filled with wine. And it's also with Florence Fabricon, who I love as well. And there's a lunch provided, which I always love a free lunch. And it's so lovely. And Eric and Florence both have such a great way of thinking about wine and drinking, and it's really refreshing to hear how they think about wine and how they taste, because it's something that has stood the test of time, and there's so many trends that go in and out of fashion, and I think that they're just some of the best people in the world.
Yeah. So let's talk about COTE. How that opportunity happened, that you are a partner.
It's crazy, right? No, I think so. I met Simon Kim at his first restaurant, Peora, and his dream was, he's a Korean guy, and from his dream was always to open up his Korean steakhouse. And, again, before all of this focus on Asian Americans, people did not respect him as a Korean restaurateur. I mean, it was him in a room of French and Italian dudes, right? Always. And no one thought you could make a Michelin-starred Korean restaurant, let alone, an elevated version of, like, let's say, Korean barbecue, And so it was so important to him to make a New York Fat Cat Steakhouse with a Michelin-starred wine program. And he invited me, Chef David, Tom Brown, Amy, Wesley, SK to be his partners in this. And I wasn't even 30 at the time. I was, 27 years old and given this opportunity to be a partner at a restaurant group. And he's just the most generous man. But I think when he asked, I was like, are you serious? Are you sure that's a good idea? But no, it's just been an incredible journey, and it's humbling every day.
Well, tell me about putting together the wine list there, because it is a steakhouse. It's a steakhouse disguised as a Korean restaurant, and a Korean restaurant disguised as a steakhouse. But New York, you think steaks, you think Silver Oak, Opus One, you think all the big. So how did you approach this? A wine list of you pairing so much with beef.
Yes, beef is king at COTE.
Yeah.
For sure. So I think that, Simon and I wanted to take a non-traditional approach to the wine list. We wanted to have the classics, the blue chips, of course. We want people to come in and feel comfortable. But we wanted to also sing to like a lot of, the marginalized regions and people that don't get to see those classic New York City wine lists. And I tell a funny story in the book about when the New York Times restaurant reviewer comes in, Pete Wells, and he opens the wine list and he orders a bottle of wine that like we don't have. We just sold the last bottle of, which is so rough. And he's looking through the list, and I have other stories about him in the book, and I think he's actually quite good at his job. And it's a hard job. And, I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, what's he going to think about our wine list? He is going to rip it apart because it is so different. And actually the opposite. He's saying its praises in a review, which he really does for wine lists. He barely will even mention the wine program. So the fact that he did and had nice things to say about it was really incredible. And then from there, as soon as one trendsetter says it, everyone follows suit. So it sort of gave my program credence, which, for better or for worse, is important. I think as a young woman, no one takes you seriously until you get that backing from one of those OGs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, and also, you mentioned this earlier, you bottle everything in magnums.
Yeah.
How did you work that out? So
again, this was, Simon and I, we get together and we always have these crazy ideas. And this is one of those crazy ideas. And it's why I love him as well. As a restaurateur, I've worked historically for people that, I love coming up with these crazy ideas, and they're always like, no. But Simon's the opposite. I mean, sometimes, he's actually too supportive, where he's like, great, do it. And then I do it, and it's like a disaster. But so we came up with this idea of like, hey, wine tastes better in magnums. It's a fact, right? There's less oxidation. It stays fresher for longer. Why aren't more people pouring wines by the glass out of magnums? You were seeing a little bit of it. I mean, Mike Madrigal was probably the most famous example at Bar Boulud. He would open a special magnum once a week or so and, serve it, usually a rare bottling. But no one else was really doing it. Joe Campanelli did a little bit in Brooklyn. And so I investigated further. Well, there's a reason no one does it. It's really hard. First of all, quantity-wise, it doesn't exist. So I thought, no problem. I'll just go to the wineries directly and ask them to bottle it, which also turned out to be a whole thing. But I think the more challenging things are, the more I wanted to do them. And it's still to this day, 4 years later, not without its challenges. I think we finally now found our rhythm, and we have lots of growers that are always willing to bottle things for us, specifically in Magnum for COTE. So it's sort of our way of telling the guests we care about them and we love them, and that our By the Glass program is literally one of the best in the city, because even if you try these wines elsewhere, they'll taste better at COTE because they're from magnums.
So I want to say, yeah, you're not, you're doing a little switcheroo. It's just pouring a bunch of Barefoot and Yellowtail, because obviously wine tastes better in magnums. But the producers, how did you get produced? So because, there's system. New Jersey plays a 3-tiered system. So how do you get, do you guys have an import vein? Like, how are you getting these direct? Because when you'd have to have the magnums and you have to go through the distributor, and the distributor's like, oh, I'll just sell them to anybody. Like, how did you? Because this is for wine, this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think the 3-tier system can be very confusing, and for new wine buyers, I learned a lot just from dating Lyle and seeing what he dealt with on his side. And I realized there's actually a lot of room for negotiation and special projects that a lot of wine buyers don't take advantage of with their importers and distributors, because they just don't know. And they don't know that they can really sort of push the limits. So I kind of made a wish list of what I would want, and I discussed it with these different distributors and importers, and they talked to the wineries. 90% of them said pass, but we only needed that 10% to begin. And once the growers realized, hey, they're paying their bills, and now, it's a Michelin-starred restaurant.
Yeah, now everybody's like, oh, what about some magnums for you, Victoria?
Yeah, now everything's different, but at the beginning it was very rough.
So, how did you guys make it through last year at COTE?
Yeah, this was the hardest year ever. It was I mean, we could talk about this just for a whole hour by itself. It was incredibly challenging. At COTE, we were unique in that we were one of the only restaurants in all of New York City that stayed open the entire time. The entire time. And Simon, going back to how generous he is, he kept the line level employees. He continued to pay them out of his own pocket for a month, even though they were technically furloughed. And then management team, he kept all of us on. And so that we could have a paycheck, and we hustled for that. It was myself and the other partners working delivery, which is which is very stressful. But we closed the restaurant for indoor dining, and then that week started delivery service. We started nationwide shipping. We started then doing outdoor dining, then eventually into indoor dining. And I think that because we were so resilient the whole time, that it really gave us a leg up. Now when everyone's reopening, we've already been doing this for 6 months. And it just made the team even stronger, but it wasn't without its challenges. I mean, some crazy, crazy stuff happened.
And speaking of crazy, so how do you how do you begin opening a restaurant inside of a pandemic? So you did COTE Miami. So like,
I know it's insane. So I think that, COTE Miami was planned pre-pandemic, even. And there was this opportunity when the pandemic really hit that Simon could have gotten out of the project. And he was like, should he? Everyone was closing. No one was thinking about opening. But he pushed through and he thought, no, this is going to be a good idea. I trust the team. I trust this project. So we moved forward with opening it. And we opened up in a pandemic, which is crazy. And it was a huge success. So I think that all of us, Simon's crazy ideas are usually great ideas.
What's that Apple ad about the crazy ones?
Yeah.
The misfits.
Yeah. I mean, here's to them.
All right. Totally. So what's going on with the reopening? Like you said, you've been open. Like you said, we've been doing this for 6 months. What are you seeing? Like, how are your patrons, your guests feeling to come back in and see you and get their wine from Magnums? What was like that first service back like?
Yeah, I mean, it truly was quite joyful. I think that during the pandemic, where there were so many hard times, I mean, we would come to work and pass by, those frozen body trucks where there were like dead bodies, and we were delivering food, and then we would get it from both sides. People would say, why are you open? It's like irresponsible for you to be open. Well, what's the alternative? Like, no one's helping us. And then, we would send food to someone and it wasn't perfect and they would want a refund. And it was such a challenge financially, emotionally. It was a toll. All of us worked 7 days a week. It was exhausting. And there was almost no light at the end of the tunnel. At times, it was really dark, like very dark. And but when we were able to welcome those first guests back, it was just the most joyful thing. You take for granted service in general and being able to serve someone, and you forget that people think, oh, when I go out to dinner, I have a great time and it's restorative, but you forget as the service person also the benefit you receive by serving others and how that helps heal you and helps give you, helps you find yourself and gives you a sense of purpose.
Wow. I think Muhammad Ali once said, service is the rent you pay to be on earth.
Yeah.
So with all this stuff going on, books and book tours and living the New York, Miami life, what excites you about wine and hospitality right now?
I think that New York especially, had a very hard year, but we're coming back. And now more so than ever before, it feels like the roaring 20s. People are excited to live again, excited to hug each other, to share these bottles of wine and these special moments. And it's just really a joy to be able to see that, but also more so than ever before, to be able to provide that place, not just for our guests, but for our employees. They've had a really hard year as well. A lot of them financially didn't have stability. Their family members, they lost friends, loved ones. And to be able to provide this safe place for them, I think is probably the most rewarding.
Mm-hmm. So we've been talking about food, wine, life, and your love of it all. What wine? Is there a wine? Is there a wine that is just symbolic of your life with your husband, Lyle?
The first wine we ever drank together, I often think of, and we also served at our wedding as well.
Out of Magnums?
Of course. So it was on our first date. Again, like I said, I thought he was going to surprise me with these fancy wines, but he pulls out a bottle of Domaine de la Tourvière from Collioure, which is like where the Pyrenees Mountains fall into the Mediterranean Sea in the south of France. This small little fishing village. No one's ever really heard of it. Even in wine, people haven't really heard of Collioure. So it's a simple table red, and it's delicious. And it was, we drank a Magnum on our first date, which also...
What is that? What grape is that?
So, they make a few different wines, but it's usually like the classic Languedoc blend or Roussillon blend of like Grenache based and Carignan and such. And then, that was our first trip we took together, was to there as well. And then we got married, we had the winemakers come and they had their wine. And so it's just, for me, it feels so full circle. And it's why I love Lyle, is that this appreciation for the simple things. Like, there can be just as much joy in a $20 bottle as there can be in a $2,000 bottle, sometimes more. And that's the beauty of wine. I think the world of wine is so expansive, and there's so much to learn. And for someone like myself and Lyle, who are always very curious, it's like this, it can be this wonderful place.
Wow. I think that's a good place to end the conversation. Victoria, thank you so much for coming. You have a busy schedule, you have a busy life, but I really appreciate you coming, sit down, getting to ask you some questions, learn more about you. Lyle's invited me up to the Sherman place, so just so you know, so you might be stuck with me. But tell people where they can find you, how they can be a part of the things you're up to and what you're doing.
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram at Victoria__James, or on Twitter at Get Your Grape On.
Get Your Grape On. And do you have any social media accounts for Wine Empowered?
Of course. It's at Wine Empowered on Instagram.
Awesome. Oh, my God. Victoria James, thank you so much. And you guys, I hope you... had much, when you listen to this, I hope you really get the heart of this woman and all the wonderful things she's doing and her passion for service, for hospitality. So my peoples, until the next time, cheers to the Mavericks, the philosophers and deep thinkers, which you and Lyle definitely fall in the category. And, of course, to all you wine drinkers, it's MJ. And until next time, peace.